So today I want to develop the perch, and I want to push the feet and legs back a little bit. They're a little too light in value, and they call too much attention to themselves, especially the back one, which is mostly in the shadow of the body of the bird. I also want to develop the perch, add some texture to it, and adjust the values a little bit, adjust the color temperature. First, I'll work on the legs and feet. So I'm mixing up a pool of nice liquid paint. I'm going to be using my Winsor Newton Payne's Gray, the bluer of the two Payne's Grays, but I want it to be nice and thin so that I can create a subtle glaze rather than a dark value. So now I'm going to paint over the rearmost leg, almost the entire leg, especially up close to the body where it's in the shadow of the body. This is way too light in value. I'll leave just a few small highlights. Mixing in a little bit of clear water. Adjusting the color, moving it around a little bit. I'll push it up into the body just a little bit. Now I've squeezed out my brush, and I'm using the thirsty brush to lift up some of the glaze that I just painted on, make it a more subtle effect. That's much better. Now I'll do a little bit of the same thing on the nearer leg. This leg is mostly in the light, so the shadows don't need to be, I don't need to push it back nearly as much as I did the other one, but it's a little bit light in value. So here I'm more adjusting what I did rather than completely painting over it. That's better. So now I've got a wet passage on the feet, and the next thing I plan to do is to paint the perch. So I'm going to have to be really careful to stay away from the wet areas that I just painted as I develop the perch, so that I don't allow the the work that I do on the perch to bleed into what I just did on the feet and the legs. Drying it out just a little bit to make it easier to avoid having one run into the other. So there are pock marks on my perch. This perch has been, this log has been sitting around in our backyard for quite a long time, and it's very weathered. And part of the weathering is these pock marks. So I'm going to try to suggest a few of those. I'm using my brown mix of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and I'm mixing up a nice wet pool of that in the cup of the small mixing palette that I have. Here I am. I'm just bringing water into the cup and making a nice liquid pool. Now I'm ready to start painting. Again, staying away from the wet areas that I just painted. So what I'm doing here, I'm trying to do something that's very difficult, which is to create a random pattern. Unfortunately, I have my photograph to go by, and that shows the randomness of the pattern quite nicely. So it's a good model. Some of the pock marks are elongated, turning into the longitudinal ribs of the general texture of the log. Again, I'm striving for randomness here, or at least something that appears random. I'm using my grainer This is the larger filbert grainer, and I've loaded it up with my ultramarine blue and burnt sienna mix. And now I'm going to use it to paint in some grain, oddly enough. And here again, I don't want to do so much that it becomes gimmicky, but a few passages here and there will send the message that there's a lot of texture on this log. There, I think that's a good amount. Maybe a little more right here. Just leading the eye off the paper or into the painting, as the case may be. All right. I think I'm going to warm up my perch a little bit by painting some burnt sienna into it. It's a little dangerous because I just finished doing that fine line work, but I don't really mind if I lose some of the definition of that line work. And I don't mind at all if my dark pock marks get pushed back a little bit, are made a little more subtle. So I do need to remember that I have fairly fresh wet paint in the area of the toes, and I don't want to make a mess of that. So I need to be careful to avoid letting the burnt sienna bleed into the wet toe area. So I'm using my number 7, I believe this is, pretty large brush, and a fairly liquid mix of the paint. What I'm painting right at the moment is a little strong, but I can redistribute it. So now I'm going to squeeze the water out of my brush, create a thirsty brush so that I can lift a little bit of this and make it a little more subtle and move it around just a little. There, I like that. Just a touch warmer. And there's a nice variation in color temperature. There's some passages that are a little on the blue side, some passages that are very neutral, and some passages that are quite warm. All together, it makes an interesting looking perch. And I think that the pock marks are fine. They're maybe a little dark, but I think they're fine actually. Yeah, and I think the amount of graining is just about right, enough to suggest an overall graininess, but not hit you in the face with it. All right, so I'm gonna stop there, I think.